Hey y'all, I'm Dan, and this is Kinfolk, Stories of Community and Connection. I'm excited to share today's episode because it's a special one. Our first out-of-state guest, all the way from Irvine, Kentucky. Ron joins us to talk about his journey as an innkeeper at Snug Hollow Bed and Breakfast, his work in the nonprofit world, and how he's created a space for people to reconnect with nature and themselves. From personal stories of resilience to the beauty of Appalachia, this conversation is one you won't want to miss. Let's dive in. Hey Ryan, welcome to Kinfolk, Stories of Community and Connection. Thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here with you and just spend some time together.
Me too. So I do want to ask, I know I was doing a little bit of pre-snooping, a little bit of research before us talking, and I got to say I'm a little intimidated. It looks like you wear many hats. So if you do want to, before diving too deep, because I'll squirrel really easy, if you just want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll just take it from there.
Oh goodness, introduce myself. So there's like you said, different hats. So I think the number one hat that's top of mind for me, top of heart, is me and my partner have been working on um, moving for the last 2 years, and we got to just recently in the last few months acquire a beautiful bed and breakfast on 300 acres. So we do anything from couples to girlfriend getaways to family reunions to small weddings to just folks wanting to come and have a real Appalachian experience in a place that feels safe. You know, it's we have 3 miles of walking trails. We have 4 custom cabins on site, too, in-house suites, which I'm recording in one of those now. We have a big farmhouse here. That's usually where we have breakfast and dinners, and everything's vegetarian. So it's vegetarian Southern style cuisine. We have a cookbook that the previous owner, Barb Napier, created, and she just has really perfected so many dishes, and we're honored to be here. So I guess that hat is that new innkeeper hat that I'm wearing. And a day like today, when we have lots going on here, we all kind of just work on the same level playing field, and there's no hierarchies or things like that. So we all just kind of pitch in and help whenever. You'll see us all doing all the jobs here. And so to me, that was important, regardless of what I'd done in past iterations of my life. It was important for me to come here and just be a part of the crew. And same thing for my partner, Will. We worked on this, like I said, for 2 years to get here. We didn't just have the capital or collateral to be able to do a project like this. We worked with CDFIs, which are community development financial institutions, to help us with this project. So if just kind of a shout out to those folks doing that work out there, because it really does make an impact and difference, and it helps keep places like this, that's a really sacred place for so many, in folks' hands that are really want to keep it the same, you know, or not big land developers and things like that. I don't know how else to say that in a couth way, so I'll just say it. You know, it keeps it out of the hands of those folks that have everything already, right, and puts
Exactly.
it back in folks' hands that don't maybe have as much, and want to work on building something and continuing the legacy that other folks have built. And so
Hmm.
I think that's an important thing in Appalachia, because what happens oftentimes is we collectively, as a society, bigger companies or organizations or folks that already have so much come in and take more and more and more, and then don't leave as much for local folks or people with roots in this area. So I think that's important to just throw out there. So that's the one hat I guess I could the biggest introduction. But on top of that, I've worked in the nonprofit field for about a decade as the executive director for multiple nonprofits. I just finished up a doctoral degree a couple years ago. My focus of my research was post-traumatic spiritual growth. So looking at people's spiritual and religious trauma, and then essentially how they grew beyond that, um, for very lack of a really long explanation. But that was really valuable work and felt really great, the research part. And also, learned throughout that process, maybe academia wasn't exactly where I wanted to land. I'm also an author of a book called My Drug Dealer Brought Me to God. Uh, the stupidity in me thought it would be a great idea to publish a book on top of publishing a dissertation right around the same time. So I did that, and I don't suggest it to anybody. Do one at a time and just take your time. And And anyway, so I really published that not necessarily to be some New York Times bestseller or something, though I was happy, however, it grew organically. But it was really because my divine put it on my heart to put it out there. And I'm 12 years free from opioids. And I know lots of my friends and lots of other folks around me didn't make it. And so I almost felt that I had to pay honor to those folks and myself when I got the call to write down my story and share it with people. So
I think it's great though, the work, that you do and the stuff that you're involved in, with everybody, I'm sure in Appalachia, somebody close to them being a family member or a friend, have been affected by, drugs. And, me personally, I lost my oldest brother to drugs. So it's great to see, that the awareness that is, in the community and, the people who are doing things to try to help and to, share their story to be that for people. I do want to jump back to you and your partner, coming into the bed and breakfast. Did that start out as like a kind of like a long-term goal, or was it just something that, sprung on both of you, or how did that happen? How did that come to be?
well, it was very serendipitous, and it was also definitely never planned. So um, we sat about 2.5 years ago. We sat in meditation at a creek where we lived. We walked about a mile down the creek, and we had this little spot we'd always sit and meditate. It was behind someone else's condo. We had lived in a little condo neighborhood, but luckily there were a little forest and streams and creeks. So we meandered up and found this special spot that we liked to go to when we weren't able to get out to one of the parks or one of our favorite hiking spots. And we were doing a meditation there, and it was right on the cusp of me graduating, and my partner was Will was finishing up his master's degree in clinical psychology. And we had a conversation prior where we're just thinking, gosh, we've seen certain folks, like my mom's was in that field for 25 years, had a private practice, and I was obviously still traumatized by the academic world in some ways, not always, but in some ways, really, it's a tough road to be on if you're depending on who you are and what you're doing and what kind of demeanor you might have. And for me, I'd already worked in the nonprofit field for so long, and there were so many politics involved with that. And realizing that academia was somewhat similar to that in some ways was disheartening for me. And I saw them anyway. I saw patterns and things that I just didn't love. And so we had a conversation on where we're going to go next. And so we went into that meditation kind of after that conversation, and uh, at the end of it, we were both crying, and we had this beautiful vision of these rolling hills and this green and bringing people back to nature. And it didn't sound clinical, it didn't sound academic, but for some reason, it sounded like that was the perfect thing for us to do. And that all the other things we did in life kind of led us to this moment where we were going to be able to somehow bring people back to connection with Mother Nature. You drink water, you live on the earth, the fire sustains us through the sun and through cooking of our food and things. So just the actual four elements and nature itself. And we thought, well, gosh, what does that mean? Right. And so Will was the first one to say, it feels like to me, maybe we're supposed to open some type of spiritual retreat center or spiritual center. And we both were continuing to cry at this moment because we were still, I mean, it was just this profound moment. I can't put it into words except to say something had awakened in us at that moment to guide us to our next step. And a lot of times, I just kind of follow my guidance. It's funny, we have a couple eating in our farmhouse this evening, celebrating their 33rd anniversary, and they own a bookstore locally. And they're like, well, what made you want to write a book? And I said, really, divine put it on my heart. And I didn't really necessarily know if I wanted to do it, but I had to,
Hmm.
because I just had to follow where I was guided. And this kind of felt similar, except it was much more graceful. It seemed that it was just more of here's what it could be. And long story short, about a week later, we were at my graduation party, and we had a friend who said, hey, Will had shared this whole experience with them, very detailed, and they were in the corner. I think they're both probably tearing up again. And she said, well, it sounds like you need to be looking for some type of spiritual retreat center to take over, or to create or something. And we had a mutual friend named Cesarina who was selling a center up in Canada. And so we thought, well, this must be the divine alignment, right? Because how this is too synchronistic to not mean something. So we went up there to Canada and looked at the retreat center. It was beautiful. I mean, it's Canada. The water's clean, the air's crisp. It's beautiful. There were 8 weeping willows in the front of the property. It's
Oh
on
my
30
goodness.
acres. It was beautiful, but for some reason, it just did not feel right. And at this time, we still hadn't even thought about capital or collateral or anything like that. I mean, it was obviously back of mind, but really it was just about keep following the next breadcrumbs. And so those breadcrumbs ended up not being what we were really looking for. And on the way home, I had a friend who's a TEDx speaker and a conscious rap artist and a spiritual leader in our community. And she's my best friend. And I just was chatting with her about kind of the disappointment, the letdown of like, this wasn't, we had this beautiful vision and this didn't line up with it. And she said, the vision you're saying to me sounds like Snug Hollow Bed and Breakfast, and that I'd been to before I told you about it, Ryan. And I said, oh yeah, I remember you telling me about that. It sounded beautiful. Well, I looked up pictures online right after that, and it was exactly what we had seen in our visions. I mean, exactly. It was these rolling hills. It was like this safe place. So Snug Hollow sits in a holler. It's if you don't know what a holler is, it's pretty much like a bowl, for lack of better words, with one entrance and one exit usually, though all hollers are different. But our particular holler is like a open shaped heart with a who knows, with a little bottom part that's open. That's where the road comes in, and then there's 2 little parts of the holler that make it up, and it's ridge to ridge on both sides, so like cliff to cliff. It's very protected. It's very safe. It's very quiet. It's like an animal and nature refuge here, but um, we realized that's exactly what we saw. And so we emailed Barbara Napier, who was the previous owner. We call her Barb. But Barb said, call me in the morning. I called her in the morning and I talked to her for a little bit and told her about our visions and all the things. I'm pretty transparent. So even if some people are like, saw visions, we don't care. Just say what happens. And that's what happened. We were in meditation and saw this vision of this place. And when we looked up the pictures, it was identical to what we saw, and we can't make that up. And also, I found out later on, Barb's a good saleswoman, but also realized that Barb truly meant it in her heart when she said this place was meant for you. And we came down about a week later, and coming up the drive, we immediately felt it. And we said, okay, now how do we get here? Right. And we thought maybe we would do some of this or some of that, some crowdfunding, maybe a private investor, maybe a family member that might be an investor, not on my side of the family, but maybe on Will's. And none of that panned out. And we just never gave up. We kept calling people, asking people. I called all my friends that had foundations, or all my friends that, were connected folks in the community, and just said, hey, like, where do I go from here? And some would drop nuggets, and I'd just keep following the breadcrumbs and along the way. And eventually we ran across some CDFIs, these community development financial institutions that are nonprofits. They're nonprofit lenders. And they still collect their 7.5% prime rate and their loan origination fees. They're still banks, but they're banks that have hearts, that care about people, that want to see people do things that they couldn't do without them. And long journey through that. But through Barb working with us on pricing of the place, and through working with a conglomerate of CDFIs, there were 3 total we worked with, plus a foundation.
Oh, wow.
So to help us get some recoverable grants, which are essentially, if you're not familiar with that, it's essentially like a grant that you have to repay with low or no interest. So it's not like a nonprofit grant. There are grants out there for businesses, LLCs, for profit organizations. And a lot of times, though, you do have to pay that back. So we really got creative. We didn't give up, and it was a long journey to get here. And lots of times it was traumatic. I mean, in the meantime, we had sold our house about a year ago. We were a few days before closing, and the whole deal fell through. And so we were unhoused. We luckily stayed with my sweet mamaw, who let us live in her basement, which sounds awful, but it was a finished basement. I mean, we weren't roughing it too bad.
Right.
And then eventually we had some short-term, living that we stayed in, so we were okay. And also, it's scary to like leave your home and sell your house and and then things not work out. And so we definitely had a moment of, um, gosh, just loss, right? And then we were able to somehow come back to the drawing table and get it worked out, and we closed on June 28th of this year, and we haven't woken up one day without having gratitude in our hearts for the experience. Now, some nights at the beginning we were sleeping very little because we were moving on top of training, on top of we closed on a Friday, and we we had a full house here Friday night,
Oh my
staying
Lord.
and eating and celebrating and having their experiences here in the Holler. So we couldn't, so we had to integrate real fast. And anyway, it's been a fun journey since, and even a day like today when there's so much going on, and I hear the golf cart running food up to cabins, and I hear folks coming up the driveway. We have a little doorbell in the driveway. Anyway, so I hear all these things going on. I know everything's taken care of, and like I said, we have great folks that work here. Will, and we have a 13-year-old daughter, and she's whipping around that golf cart. I can hear her. I can tell it's her driving it.
So funny. She's like doing donuts, tearing the grass up and stuff like that. I'm just joking.
That's the thing. We're like,
I'm just
Harper,
joking.
stay on the gravel if you can, but we got to have fun too. So we take it we take it on the trails. Like I said, we have about 3 miles of trails, about 1 2 mile loop, and then about a mile of other kind of meandering trails around the pond here and other places. So we try not to tear, but you got to have fun at the same time. No one's looking at the grass saying there's. And actually, we started offering tours to folks with like mobility concerns and things. Either folks that are older. I had a 93-year-old on the golf cart the other day. She was here celebrating her birthday, and she said,
Oh
"Oh,
my
I've never been
gosh.
able to go outside the farmhouse, really." And I said, "Well, there's a pond and there's all these things." And she said, "No." And I said, "Well, we're going if you want to." And she says, "Oh, please." And so we took about an hour and just gave a tour and just sat around and talked, and um, had a beautiful time together. So we started offering that a little bit more formally to folks that maybe aren't able to get around as easily, just to say, hey, we'll take you out so you can have the scenery and get to sit on the swing up on the hill, and sit on the bench under the eastern black walnut tree and sit here or there, just kind of hang out and get to see the beautiful views here. So
Hmm.
it's fun. So even the fun things here have a function, if that makes sense.
It sounds like a lot of fun, and I'm definitely going to make a reservation, so you'll see me in the future. But I do want to ask, do you have a favorite for you personally? Do you have a favorite spot on the farm or the land?
Well, I definitely have a few, and I have a new friend I made here just a couple weeks ago. She came here, and we connected really deeply. Actually, me and there were two girls that came as a old girlfriend getaway, and we all connected so deeply. But me and her were in deep conversation, and she said, remember that you don't have to share every piece of this place with people. So I'm not going to tell you my absolute favorite. I'll tell you where it's at, but I won't tell you how to get there. So one of the arms of the Holler kind of makes like this heart shape, but one of the heart loops is like skinnier than the other, so the other one's kind of more round and fat. And there's a spring holler up in there and the skinnier side. And that's my favorite spot on the property. And it just has a special energy there. And Will loves it as well. And one day we might build a little off-grid home up there in that little area. No one would ever see it probably, but that's probably my favorite spot as far as energetically. But I would say the labyrinth. We have a labyrinth on site as well. It's called Tad's Labyrinth. And coincidentally, Tad and his wife Tammy were just here visiting this weekend, and he was the one who created it. So I don't know if you know much about a labyrinth, but it's essentially, the best way to describe it is a maze that's one way in and one way out. So you don't get lost in it. Um, you walk the path and you end up in the center of the circle. It's a circle, and then on the way out, you walk back the same path, and then you go out. And people use it and all kinds of world religions and belief systems and spiritualities, as a prayer circle, or a place to come to pray or meditate, to do walking meditation. And so I do that every day barefoot, and that probably is my favorite place outside of, the energetics of that spring holler are special. But outside of that, that labyrinth is just, and it's perfect. You can see the holler, like the two little top of the hearts. The top of the heart, you can see that, and you get to see all the wildflowers and couple weeks ago, the goldenrod was just exploded. It looked like a sea of, yeah, like I've never seen anything like that my whole life. And the giant ironweed, when it was here, it was 10 feet tall in places, purple sprouts at the top. And it's just beautiful every season. We just had to manicure it. And usually we cut it down in the spring, but sometimes in the fall. And it looks completely different than what it looked like last week, because now the grass is short, but you still see the path even more so. So you can kind of see where you're going. Before, I mean, it was so tall. I mean, sometimes that ironweed on both sides was way taller than me. So you kind of we're kind of through a maze to some degree. And now that it's cleared out, it almost is like you see where you're going next. So I think that's what I love most about this holler in particular. Is like it always is beautiful. In the wintertime, you can see the cliff. There's 20, 30-foot cliffs all the way around the property. So you
Oh,
get to
wow.
see that. Obviously when it snows, it's gorgeous. In the fall, you have the burst of colors. That's why October is so busy. October is our busiest month because of the colors of the leaves and things. But the spring, the flowers come up. You just get to see them just grow and expand, and then mid of summer might be my favorite so far.
In your own perspective, how do you feel that Snug Hollow embodies, kind of like the Appalachian lifestyle, or how can people experience that, from just staying in the area versus staying at Snug Hollow? If you want to kind of dive into that.
Yeah, well, I'll give the background a little bit about me. So, like, and why it's important to me because my grandma is from Harlan. She was born and raised there on a 100-acre farm, overlooked the river and the railroad tracks. And like most folks, or a lot of folks, when she got old enough and well, she was one of the few folks that graduated high school in the time that she was kind of growing up. Not everyone
Hmm.
graduated high school. I don't know. People listen to this from all over the country or wherever might not know that, but lots of folks in Appalachia didn't have the means to do that. But she was lucky enough, even though she came from a pretty poor family too, that she was able to finish high school. Well, when she finished, she went to Northern Kentucky for work. So she was a secretary on the river there in Newport, Kentucky. And so it's hard because that's where my mom grew up, and that's where I grew up, was Northern Kentucky. And my other grandparents though were from the most southern part of the Cumberland Plateau. So think like Tennessee Kentucky border. Sometimes I say Nashville, but I say rural Nashville, and people think I'm thinking of. It's not like that. It was way out there, um, and it was different. It was almost my nanny. It reminds me of more Appalachian than my mamaw. But either way, my roots are Appalachian to their core.
Hmm.
I never felt right in the suburbs or the cities. And there were times I lived like downtown for short stints of time or things in Cincinnati. Always felt really out of place. I was always like, how can I get to nature as soon as possible? Like, where's the nearest park? Where's the nearest hiking place? Where's the nearest green space? Um, and so my call back here was something that I wasn't conscious of until we started this process. And then I realized that's my draw to nature. It's been for, since my sobriety, in particular, I was drawn to green spaces, but didn't 100% know that my true call was back to these mountains and foothills and hollers. And Will grew up in a really rural city, and as much as queer folks do, he wanted to migrate to the bigger cities at first. So he went to Cincinnati, Columbus, back to Cincinnati, back and forth, and and then over time he realized that it wasn't that he didn't love rural America. What he didn't love though was some of the situations that he found himself in, being in from a small kind of rural community.
Hmm.
He also was like feeling this call back to his rural roots. That's where his whole family had kind of always lived. Once they came over from Germany and other places, and immigrated over. So we have this call back to be connected to our roots more, and specifically me. Like I was really, and I speak for myself, like my nanny and my mamaw were so imperative in me becoming who I am, that it feels like an honor to them. I always say the room I'm in, which you can't see the other part of the room, but it reminds me of my nanny so much that I can't help but be happy being here.
Hmm.
And it is a very special place here. And so I think for me, it's not always about folks coming here to experience what I say they should experience, but it's them coming here to experience like the deconstruction of what they think Appalachia is, in their own way, and that looks different for every single person. And for some folks, it's like coming back home, but getting to see what home could have always felt like if it was different, maybe, because not everyone had the same situation. And Barb didn't start this place. I mean, she lived here. Obviously she had the land, but she lived in a cabin that was 186 years old, a chestnut log
Oh, wow.
cabin, with her two boys. And she built this farmhouse about 40 years ago, and she built this place from the ground up. And so right now it's this beautiful place that feels perfect to everyone who comes here. But for a long, long time, Barb worked really, really hard to make it like that. And so it didn't just happen overnight. And, she had trials and things from a young age. Also, giving the context of, people come here and think, oh, what a beautiful oasis. But it also took lots of hard work, lots of community collaboration, lots of folks helped put this farmhouse together. They always say
Exactly.
that, it was a group of folks coming together to finish a project, because it didn't just happen overnight, and it was kind of a work in progress for decades
Mm-hmm.
to get it to where it is today. And there's folks that come here from all over the country. We have someone checking in this evening from California,
Oh, wow.
and she was called to be here, and so she's coming in to visit. And she's probably never, and I'm making an assumption, I've not met her yet. She checks in any minute, but maybe she's never been in Appalachia at all, so she's not sure what to expect, and she gets to come here and experience this place, and then also go out into the towns and experience what it's like um, to really not just travel somewhere, but to be somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's different. You can travel all over, but until you're there and you're really talking with people from there and kind of understanding the culture, you're not really you're not doing the travel I like to do. I like to do the travel where I'm really immersed
Me
and
too.
learning and growing and relaxing. There's relaxation, of course. That's what we always make the joke here at Snug Hollow, that people say, what do you come here and do? And we say, nothing. Nothing at all. And Barb would say it with a straight face. I kind of laugh, and then I rail off the 20,000 things you can do. But really, you come here, you come here to do nothing. Nothing can look like sitting on the porch swings, sitting in a rocking chair, reading a book, writing a book. We've had lots of well-known authors and artists that come here. Jojo Moyes, The Giver of Stars, was written here, and dedicated to Barb. So if you open up the front of the book, it's dedicated to Barb. And I'm gonna botch the thing, but it's I think Jojo wrote, Barb Napier, who gave me stars when I needed them the most. So
My goodness.
something to that degree, and to librarians everywhere, because the book's about librarians and things like that in Appalachia. Um, so lots of cool folks have stayed here. We've been featured in National Geographic, and Oprah filmed here once,
Oh, my
and all kinds
Lord.
of other really cool things. Uh, all that is cool and great, and it's great if you want to come visit here. But I always urge people to really get out and see not just Berea, because we have a beautiful community, Berea, that's right next door, and it's the arts capital of Kentucky, the folk art capital of Kentucky. Um, and it's great. Please go visit there. But also, like, go to Irvine, go to the towns around, go to hear about the history of the furnaces here. Go hear about the railroad history. Go
Mm.
into town and look at the murals and that are painted on the walls. Take a walk across the bridge. Do something that's not just you know to say you come to Snug Hollow. I mean, you get to experience true hospitality here. You get to experience the true beauty of
Mm-hmm.
Appalachia, but you're not experiencing all of it just to come here. So we always encourage people to get out and about. It is hard to leave the holler once you're here, but I always at least encourage, if they're like, we're staying here the whole time, I'm like, okay, on your way out, you have an assignment, and it's to go here, 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 if you can. So it's a long, long answer to a question that I think could be talked about for hours and hours, about
Mm-hmm.
how we usher folks into this region for them to really see the beauty of it, and also the culture, because it's a different culture. And I'm still learning parts of my culture that I'm still have to relearn, because I didn't get to learn, um, I didn't get to grow up here, I should say. So I didn't get to learn as I grew up here. I learned through my grandparents and through family, but and through my connection with the land itself. But I'm still learning and growing, and I think
Hmm.
there's a piece of it that's important to share, just to get out here and really experience it, not just sit in your hotel rooms or people go to Red River Gorge all the time, which is about an hour away from here. Beautiful hiking, spend time
Uh-huh.
there, but then go out to the cities around and support local businesses, support local restaurants, support just the culture by listening, by trying to make as low impact as you can environmentally. Or I'm a big advocate in that, but also
Uh-huh.
just like making sure your footsteps are um, mindful. I guess is the best way to put it. And sometimes you just want to go somewhere and relax, and that's okay too. No one's hounding you to say you have to do something a certain way. And on the other side, think about too when you go somewhere. And that could be anywhere. That could be Appalachia, that could be the Caribbean, that could be Central America, that could be folks that take journeys over to Africa or India or other parts of Asia or Europe, even. I mean, just be mindful of where you're stepping and why you're stepping there, where you're spending your dollars, because it does make a difference. It makes
Hmm.
a difference for the local folks here. Um, it makes a difference for folks all over Appalachia that some of them depend on tourism as their livelihood and also don't want to be exploited at the same time. So there's this kind of dichotomy of that, kind of like this
Exactly.
scales of how to do both without too much of one or the other. So
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like that's kind of a not like a main concern, but just kind of with like a lot of stuff in West Virginia is starting to gain momentum and pick up, and there's now people buying up land and stuff kind of around. So it's kind of it's I'm happy to see it gain momentum, but it's like I don't want because I feel like Appalachia's been exploited for years, as long as I can remember. And it's like people always just want to take and never give back. So it's kind of that two-sided coin, or that scale you said. It's always
yeah, and it has happened forever. But it happened first with the indigenous folks that once lived here and
uh-huh.
traveled here and stewarded and were stewarded by this land. And then obviously it happened to Appalachian folks that settled here.
Hmm.
Oh gosh, with coal and lumber and labor, probably the three top, but um, and even art to some degree sometimes has been kind of anyway. We could talk about that all day, but I do think it's important that I do share that we have a beautiful land acknowledgement agreement that we worked on with some indigenous folks, and it was important for us as people coming and stewarding this land to make a recognition that we steward this land as it stewards us. There's reciprocity there, but even though our name is on a deed, that does not. We don't really believe that anyone can really own the land. We can only be here as like stewards, and
Right.
so I sat in meditation one day and channeled a, a land acknowledgement agreement. And then, like I said, worked with some indigenous folks and another person who does sacred retreats and things as well to kind of craft something from what my kind of raw words were and make sure. And we would cross reference that with historical data and facts and things to make sure we were on the right page. But we found that really important. Like we almost think that was a part of us getting like we had to do that before we were here because we felt like it was part of the honoring the indigenous people and the land itself. We don't believe that people can really own land. It's hard. I know I'm just trying to find another eloquent way to say that, but I just don't think. Really, we just don't believe. I think, and I'm saying we as in me and Will. And so it was important for us to say, yes, we are stewarding this place, and we'll be here for however long. And then eventually, someone will steward. Maybe it'll be our daughter Harper. Maybe it will be someone else. Maybe it will
Hmm.
be a new innkeeper that comes in that falls in love, and one day we're able to pass the baton on. And regardless, though, it has called us home, and it has called us here, and we also know that um, this is the land. This land's for the trees. This land's for the forest. This land is
Hmm.
for the plants and the animals that live here. This land is for the guests that come visit here, for um, for the people that work here. Like this
Mhm.
is a very, I mean, it's such a beautiful place. I mean, I worked fine dining in downtown Cincinnati for a few years through grad school, and uh, luckily our folks make around the same amount I made, which is great. And we came in, gave everyone a little raise, and with their tips that guests generously leave, they make probably more than what I made. And I'm sharing that to say I worked at this restaurant that was downstairs in a basement called Soda, which is delicious. I mean, if you're over in Cincinnati, well, you're gonna have to look about 3 months in advance on the weekend because they're booked out solid for months.
Oh my
But
Lord.
their food is phenomenal, and it was in. I always said it was in a dungeon because it was like downstairs.
Yeah.
So for people to get to serve folks here in the middle of nature, you know, taking a break outside and walk in the labyrinth, or just taking a moment to look at the beauty around them. They're not shoved in a basement anywhere. Um, Though we do have a commercial kitchen in our basement, but so maybe Miss Brenda, our evening chef, would say, "Well, I spend about 90% of my time in the basement." Yeah,
So, before we do lead into closing, if you could just talk a little bit about the food at Snug Hollow. I'm kind of curious on that.
yeah. So Barbara Napier has a cookbook called Snug Hollow. It's a Snug Hollow cookbook, and it has lots of our recipes. Though Miss Brenda's our evening chef, and her daughter Brittany is our morning chef, and they put spins on those recipes. With that said, the cookbook will still at least give you a baseline, and we do all vegetarian Southern style cuisine here. Um, Farm to table, farm fresh eggs from our farm next door from our friend Amy, and we really focus on we focus on, we want things to be like fresh and farm to table. But I'm laughing because I always tell people, I'm like, it's like going to your fancy grandma's house in the holler. So like, if you dine in our farmhouse, you're having 4 or 5 courses, fresh homemade bread. We have a braided rosemary bread that we're known for. I don't eat every day, but today, luckily, I got a piece of. And our tomato bit, I dipped it in our tomato bisque, which is phenomenal. And gosh, the food is really good. So we serve breakfast in the morning to folks that stay the night. And then we do serve breakfast sometimes to folks if they like call and say, "Hey, can we come in for breakfast?" We have lunch that we serve for folks that you have. It's by reservation only, of course. Um, and sometimes we do luncheons for people. We have a big baby shower coming up next weekend,
Oh,
and
nice.
then dinners are by reservation only. So our guests often will dine here. If you stay in the farmhouse, usually your food is served to you, like formal, casual fine dining downstairs. But it's like fun and it's elevated, but it's fun. It's not super formal. I mean, you can sit in your pajamas for all we care. Um, and then, if folks are in the cabins, since we have 4 custom cabins, we actually deliver their dinners right to their cabin for them. So they can, if they're out hiking and they don't have to take a shower before they come in and get all dressed up or whatever, even though we tell them they don't have to get dressed up, they sometimes do. So it's a different dining experience every day. Depends how many folks are here. A couple days ago we had 16 folks for breakfast. Tomorrow I think we have 11, and then later in the week we'll have 4. For dinner tonight we have 4. We're smaller scale. It's because we do
Yeah.
like real artisan style cuisine. Um, and we only have 2 chefs, and we have some sous chefs. Will's a great chef in his hospitality background. He's did some chefing, and his food's delicious, and no one can tell the difference between him and Miss Brenda's food because I've done about 20 quality control checks along the way. So, um, but the food is really good, uh, and being vegetarian, I think that's why we get certain folks too from different parts of the world. When we were
Oh,
in the
yeah.
purchase process, we came one time and folks got out of the car and they said, "Oh yeah, we just got into the Lexington airport." I said, "Oh, where'd you come in from?" They said, "Hawaii." I said, "Oh, were you visiting Hawaii? Now you're visiting here?" They said, "No, we live in Hawaii. Like we came here because of the vegetarian, like Southern style cooking. We wanted to experience that." So I thought that to me was like one of the coolest moments when people from paradise are coming to a different type of paradise.
For real.
Um, Speaks a lot, speaks
Uh-huh.
volumes, and their reviews were wonderful on the food. So I and Miss Brenda spoils us. Sometimes for the first like month or two we were here, she was making us dinner almost every night. Just oh, can I make you boys dinner? When she makes everyone else's dinner, And we're like, sure. And then we realized, like, wow, we better hike the trails double time if we're gonna be eating this hearty, home cooked bread every day. And it is hearty food, and it's also fresh. So I think that's the cool balance that it brings. It's not too heavy, and it's not like, sometimes people think vegetarian cooking, they think, oh, it's just veggies and that's it. Like, we have hearty dishes here too. So um yeah, some of the best food I've ever had in my life. And I worked in, one of the top 100 restaurants in the United States, voted that year after year. So when I can eat the food here and say, well, dang, that's as good, if not better, than the food I served there, and I know their food is the best there. That's how I also knew this was a gem that we were able to find and get here, and keep it the same.
Hmm.
I think that was important. We wanted to keep things the same. We have little spins on things here or there. And it was always Barb's dream to have two more cabins. So we're
Hmm.
building two small cabins. That was part of the purchase of this place. To make the revenue high enough, we um, had to build a little bit. So it worked out because it was her dream. She got to help us place it. And where it would be the best fit. And so we broke ground on that a few weeks ago. So that will be ready around um, January 2025, sometime around there. And that
Oh,
will have
awesome.
16 beds. So it will be great for larger families or small
Hmm.
retreats. Um, and yeah, so add little things here or there, but we do it very intentionally. We want to make sure that we're honoring this place and this land. And our goal is not to have some big resort style thing here. It's supposed to be intimate and real and sweet.
So now, before we do fully kind of lead into closing, are you up for the rapid fire questions?
Oh yeah, let's go. That it's going to be hard. So what's the time? You tell me the rules here, because if you don't tell me a time limit, I'll be because there's a little clock countdown on here. I can do it.
So really the main, I guess, not that there's not any rules, but it's kind of the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
And if you want, you can elaborate, but you don't have to. Okay.
Okay. Perfect. I'll try my best
So,
not to elaborate, because my mind, my external processing mind, does that. So I will. We'll see. We'll see. It's like a challenge. This is a real challenge.
all right. So question one is, if you could describe Kentucky in one word, what would it be?
Mm. A heaven pie. So people call this a slice of heaven, but it's a heaven pie. That's what I would call.
So question two is, and I got to look at my notepad because this one's okay. So this one's kind of a deeper question, but you don't have to fully dive into it if you don't want to. Okay. So if you could change one perception people have about Appalachia, what would it be?
Oh, I got goosebumps. That people here are unintelligent, and intelligence doesn't look just like degrees or whatever. Intelligence looks like skilled craftsmanship, art,
Hmm.
music. Some of the best builders in the world live here. They built some of our cabins, and some of them don't read or write. But to me, I'm intimidated by their intelligence. So
100%.
yeah.
All right. And question three, this one's going to be the hard one. Okay. So which is better, a porch swing or a rocking chair?
Porch swing, probably, yeah, always. Eh, yeah, most of the time.
I just say porch swing because like growing up, my grandma, every time we went to her house, she was always on her porch swing. So it always has like this nostalgic, like, take me back.
Same for me. My nanny, she loved all kinds of swings. So she had a swing in the tree, like a paddle swing. I don't know what you call that, but just like a little swing. And she had porch swings, and then she had standalone swings. Like the big, like we think of a porch swing, kind of all over where she lived. And so that just reminds me of her. And like I said, this room reminds me of her. Well, and my mamaw. My mamaw's ingrained in here too. But my nanny just she had a little Southern Belle twist, but she was as Appalachian as I've ever seen, and just had the biggest heart of gold. and so does I say my mammal has a heart of diamonds, but they both are. I love them porch swings.
Well, that was the only three questions I had. Before we fully close, is there anything else that you want to talk about, or any lasting pieces you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say is come visit us. Of course, we would love to have you, especially if you love nature, or you're a writer, or you're an artist, or you're someone who likes to connect with other people. We always say that there's three types of connections that happen really organically here: connection to nature, connection to others, and connection to oneself. And that those are actually three connections that create adult development. There's actually not to get too academic, but there's an adult development theory that says those three connections are what create an optimal human experience. And we have all of that here and more. And so come see us. And also, if you can't come to see us for whatever reason, or you don't want to, that's cool. Go visit some other places in Kentucky, especially, but also get out in Appalachia and visit somewhere, even if there's been times in my life, and maybe still today, where I don't have as many means as some other folks. So you know what? I go stay in a Red Roof Inn for a couple nights and go hiking somewhere, or maybe you just are able to take a day trip, or for folks that travel often and have means, put your dollars here in Appalachia. Like this is where your wood came from. Probably maybe for some of your furniture, this is how your lights were kept on in some of your places where you live. This is where lots of your favorite country music really stemmed from. This is where all the kinds of things, art, and all kinds of things. Just come put your dollars here, like not in a greedy way. Like no one's saying like, give us your money. It's just let's have some reciprocity. Like if you are, and I'm
Yes.
not using boomer in a negative way, but if you are someone 50 or anybody with means, financial means, just help. Just go and spend your money. You're still getting your service. You're still getting your product. You're still getting your art. You're not out anything. But be
Hmm.
mindful where you're spending that money, because it makes a big freaking difference where we put our
Hmm.
dollars. And the Appalachian folks that have been so exploited over time and still are to large degrees could use that more than you could even understand. And especially now with the horrific events that have happened here in Kentucky with flooding in the last few years,
Yeah.
and also just with Helene and Asheville and other places adjacent, and Tennessee, and I think even Virginia, other parts of the Appalachian areas that were impacted. Like, put your dollars out there if you can, and maybe Daniel, you can link that, or maybe you already have in some of your other
Oh,
stuff,
definitely I
just
can.
some places to send that are reputable places. But
Hmm.
um, that's my biggest thing. Just get out there, see Appalachia, get outside if you can, if you have the means, and if you have the physical ability. But also the other piece to that is that find places like Snug Hollow that the new build we're building is ADA accessible, and we have a golf cart, so we
Hmm.
can lug you around and give you some tours. So find the places that you are able to kind of to get around and see and experience, and we're happy to have you here anytime. And I think I speak for the other tourism aspects, at least, like Estill County would love to have you here. If you stay at Kathy's Broadway B&B downtown, or Homegrown Hideaways, that's over in Madison County, but close to us, check them out. Check out Harmony Hollow next door. They have a amazing 300 acres with an Airbnb, and there's such great folks over there. Like, you don't have to come here, but come somewhere. Come somewhere in Estill County or adjacent, or Appalachia. It's not a. This isn't a spiel for just here. This is just really just get out and support folks and learn the culture. I mean, it's a
Hmm.
cultural experience to be here, um, and be in the nature if you can or you want to.
I love it. Well, Ryan, I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate finally getting to talk to you. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I do hope to get to see you in person sometime when I do book and come to Snug Hollow.
We'll be happy to have you anytime, and even if we're booked up, we'll find a spot for you somewhere.
Hey, as long as I have like a sleeping bag and a spot on the floor, I'm totally fine. I'm joking. That wraps up our conversation with Ryan. I hope you enjoyed hearing his heartfelt story about the journey to becoming an innkeeper at Snug Hollow and his deep connection to the land and people of Appalachia. If you're looking to experience a unique blend of Appalachian beauty, nature, and hospitality, make sure to visit Snug Hollow Bed and Breakfast. Whether it's a peaceful retreat or a full-on adventure, Ryan and his team are there to make your stay special. As always, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, keep exploring, keep connecting, and don't be a stranger.